Hello, my name is Daniel. I am from England. I am 18 years old. I live in a big city with my family. My father is a businessman. He works very hard, and he makes a lot of money. My mother takes care of our home. She is kind and always thinks about our family. I have two brothers and one sister. We are a happy family. We have everything we need. We live in a nice house. It has a big garden with many trees and flowers. Every morning, I wake up early. I eat breakfast with my family. Then, I go to school. I study history, mathematics, and English. My teachers say I am a good student. I like learning new things, but my mind is always somewhere else. I think about faraway places. I dream about big oceans, high mountains, and cities full of people speaking different languages. I have a dream. I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to visit other countries, meet new people, and learn new things. But my father does not like my dream. He says, "Traveling is dangerous. You have a good life here. Why do you want to leave?" One morning, my father calls me to his room. He is sitting in a big chair. His face is serious. He looks at me and says, "Daniel, I want to talk to you." I sit down. I know what he wants to talk about. He wants to stop me from traveling. He asks, "Why do you want to leave home? You have everything here. You have a good family, a good house, and a good future. Why do you want to risk your life?" I do not know how to answer. I love my father, and I respect him, but I also love my dream. I try to explain, "Father, I want to see the world. I want to learn about different people. I want to speak new languages. I want to have adventures." My father shakes his head. "Adventures?" he says. "Adventures are dangerous. The world is not safe. The sea is full of storms. The roads are full of thieves. You can die." I listen to his words, but my heart does not change. Yes, traveling is dangerous. Yes, I can die. But I can also live a life full of stories. I can see things that no one in my family has seen before. I go to my mother. Maybe she will understand me. I sit next to her and say, "Mother, I want to travel. I want to see the world. Please, talk to Father. Maybe with your help, I can go." She looks at me with love, but she also looks worried. She touches my face and says, "Daniel, my son, I love you, but traveling is not safe. Your home is here. Your future is here. Stay with us. Life in England is good." I feel sad. My father does not understand me. My mother does not understand me. No one understands my dream. Every night, I lie in my bed and think about traveling. I imagine walking through the streets of a new city. I imagine talking to people in different languages. I imagine sailing on a big ship across the ocean. I do not know how, but I will follow my dream. One day I will travel. One day I will see the world. 1 year passed. I still thought about traveling every day. My father wanted me to forget my dream, but I could not. My mother hoped I would stay in England, but my heart was somewhere else. I wanted to see the world. One day, I had a chance. I visited a big town called Hull. It was a busy place. The streets were full of people. Merchants sold fruits, fish, and cloth. Horses pulled heavy carts. Ships came and went from the harbor. The smell of the sea was everywhere. I walked through the town, looking at everything. Then, I saw an old friend. His name was Thomas. We had gone to school together when we were younger. I had not seen him for a long time. "Daniel," he called, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see the town," I said. And you? What are you doing? Thomas smiled. My father has a ship. We are going to London tomorrow. Come with us. It will be a great adventure. London, a big city. I had never been there before. I thought about my father's words. Traveling is dangerous. You have a good life here. But I also thought about my dream. I hesitated. I don't have money for a journey, I said. Thomas laughed. You don't need money. My father is the captain. He will let you travel for free. This was my chance. I was not prepared. I had no clothes, no food, no plan. But my heart was full of excitement. I will go, I said. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, thinking about the journey. Tomorrow, I would leave home for the first time. I would travel across the sea. I felt nervous, but I also felt happy. The next morning, I went to the harbor. The ship was large, with tall sails and strong wooden sides. The sailors were busy. Some carried barrels of food and water. Others climbed the ropes, preparing the sails. Thomas introduced me to his father, Captain Roberts. The captain was a strong man with a loud voice. So, you want to be a sailor? He asked. I want to see the world, I said. He laughed. Then let's see if the sea likes you. The ship left the harbor. The wind pushed the sails. The land became smaller and smaller. Soon, there was nothing but the endless sea around us. At first, everything was wonderful. The sun was bright, and the waves were gentle. The ship moved smoothly across the water. I stood at the front of the ship and felt free. This is amazing, I said to Thomas. He smiled. Wait until we see London. You will love it. But my happiness did not last long. That night, the wind changed. Dark clouds filled the sky. The sea became rough. The ship moved up and down, side to side. Then the storm came. The wind screamed. The waves crashed against the ship. Rain poured from the sky. The ship rocked like a toy. Hold on! The sailors shouted. I held onto the ropes. The ship tilted left, then right. Water splashed over the sides. The sails flapped wildly. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. My clothes were soaked. I thought about home. I thought about my warm bed. I thought about my father's words. Traveling is dangerous. The storm lasted all night. I did not sleep. I held on to the ship and prayed. Please, let me live. I don't want to die. When the sun rose, the storm was gone. The sea was calm again. The sky was clear, but the ship was damaged. The sails were torn. Some barrels of food were lost. The sailors were tired. I sat on the deck, exhausted. My body ached. My hands hurt from holding the ropes all night. My heart was still beating fast. Thomas sat next to me. That was a bad storm, he said. I nodded. I thought I was going to die. He laughed. Now you are a real sailor. I looked at the sea. It was beautiful again. The danger was gone. But I had learned something important. Traveling was not easy. I wanted adventure. I wanted to see the world. But I had never thought about storms, danger, and fear. I survived. But I knew this was only the beginning. After surviving the storm at sea, I was exhausted, but there was still a sense of excitement within me. As the days passed, I grew more used to the rhythm of life aboard the ship. We sailed toward London, and I felt both nervous and curious about the big city I had heard so much about. I was eager to see it for myself, Would it be as grand as people said? Would I feel like I belonged there, or would I be just another traveler passing through? The journey was long, and the days at sea were sometimes boring. There was little to do except help with small tasks on the ship and speak to the sailors. Most of the time I spoke with Thomas. He seemed to know so much about sailing and the world beyond England. He had traveled to many places with his father, and his stories were always filled with excitement and mystery. "I've been to Africa, Daniel," Thomas said one evening, his eyes sparkling with the memory of it. "I've seen the markets there, full of gold, ivory, and spices. I've seen people living in ways you can't imagine. Africa is a place of opportunity, but it's also dangerous." "Dangerous?" I asked, intrigued. "How do you mean?" "Well, there are pirates who want to steal everything you have, and sometimes the trade can be tricky. People don't always want what you offer." He paused. "But if you're smart, you can make a lot of money in Africa." I thought about his words. Opportunity. The idea of making money in a new, faraway land was very appealing to me. But I didn't know much about business or trade. I had lived a comfortable life in England, where things were easy, predictable. We arrived in London several days later. The city was even bigger than I had imagined, with tall buildings, busy streets, and people everywhere. I had seen nothing like it before. The harbor was crowded with ships from all over the world. Men and women rushed around, unloading goods, shouting to one another in different languages. There was an energy in the air that felt contagious. After we docked, Captain Roberts invited me to join him on an adventure. He was going to Africa, he explained, and he wanted me to come along. "The journey to Africa is long," Captain Roberts told me. "It's not just about sailing. It's about understanding how to do business. People in Africa need many things, and if you know what to bring, you can sell it for a good price." I was excited. I had no experience in business, but I wanted to learn. This was a chance to see the world, to earn money, and maybe even to build a future for myself. Over the next few weeks, Captain Roberts taught me everything he knew about trade. He explained the importance of understanding what people wanted in different parts of the world. He told me about the markets in Africa and the things that sold best there: cloth, tools, and food. "You have to know the people you're trading with," he said one day as we sat on the deck of the ship. In Africa, the people value different things than we do here in England. For example, they may not care much about the fine clothes we wear, but they love good quality food and tools. You need to understand what they need and be able to provide it. I listened carefully. I had never thought about business in this way before. It was more than just selling something. It was about understanding the world and how people lived in different places. When we reached Africa, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I had never been this far from home. The land was different, hot, dry, and vast. There were huge markets where people traded everything from spices to precious metals. The air was full of noise and movement. Captain Roberts took me to a market in a large African city. I was amazed by what I saw. The market was full of people from all over Africa. There were traders selling beautiful fabrics, food, and jewelry. There were also men who traded in animals: camels, goats, and cattle. I saw things I had never imagined: colors, smells, and sounds that were completely new to me. Captain Roberts explained how to approach the people at the market. "You need to talk to them with respect," he said. They will listen to you if you show that you understand what they need. I was nervous, but I tried to follow his advice. I approached a man who was selling spices. "Hello," I said, trying to sound confident. "I have some fine cloth from England. Would you be interested in trading for some of your spices?" The man looked at me carefully. "You bring good cloth?" he asked, touching the fabric. "It's soft, but the color is not what we like here. We prefer red and yellow." I felt a pang of disappointment. I had brought the wrong colors. But instead of giving up, I tried to learn from the experience. I asked him what colors he preferred and what other goods he needed. He told me about the types of cloth he liked and also mentioned that he needed tools for his farm. I went back to Captain Roberts and told him what I had learned. He smiled. "That's the right attitude, Daniel. Now you know what to bring next time. You're learning." A few days later, Captain Roberts helped me make my first successful trade. We had brought several crates of fine tools, knives, hammers, and other items. These were things the African traders needed. I found a man who wanted to trade his spices for the tools. We agreed on a price. I was nervous, but the transaction went smoothly. After the trade was complete, I felt a rush of excitement. I had made my first successful trade. I had earned money, and I had learned something valuable about how business worked in Africa. "I told you it wasn't easy," Captain Roberts said, "but you did well, Daniel. Now, you've learned the most important lesson. Never stop learning. The world is full of opportunities, but you have to know how to find them." I looked at the money in my hand. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my future. I realized that I had much more to learn, but I was ready. As we sailed back to England, I thought about my journey. I had started with nothing, just a dream of seeing the world. Now I had money in my pocket, and I had learned about trade and business. I had seen new lands, met new people, and learned how to survive in a world that was so different from my own. I knew that this was just the beginning. I had many more journeys ahead of me. I wanted to see more of the world, to trade more, to learn more. The world was vast, and I was only just beginning to understand it. And so, I decided to continue my travels. I would learn more about the world of business and trade. I would discover new places, meet new people, and build a life for myself far away from England. After my first successful trade in Africa, I felt like nothing could stand in my way. I had made money, learned the trade, and gained confidence in myself. I was starting to see the world not just as a place of adventure, but as a place full of opportunities waiting to be seized. I had big plans for the future, and I knew that this was only the beginning of my journey. I was eager to continue traveling, to expand my business, and to see where the next adventure would take me. I had heard whispers of danger on the seas. Pirates, they were called. But like most stories of pirates, I didn't pay much attention to them. I thought they were just tales spun to keep sailors on edge. What harm could a few pirates really do to a ship like ours? But I would soon learn that the world I had stepped into was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Our next journey took us from Africa to the Caribbean, where we hoped to establish trade connections with new markets. Captain Roberts was confident in his plan, and so was I. The wind was favorable, and the sea was calm. Days turned into weeks as we sailed across the vast ocean. Everything seemed peaceful, and I couldn't have been happier. I spent my days learning more about navigation and trade, and in the evenings I would relax on deck, gazing at the stars. I had grown used to the life of a sailor, and the thought of pirates never crossed my mind. I felt invincible, as though nothing could touch us. Little did I know, a storm, one far greater than any I had ever experienced, was on the horizon. One night, as the moonlight glistened on the water, I saw something on the horizon, two dark shapes cutting through the waves. At first, I thought it was another ship, but as the shapes grew closer, my stomach sank. These were not friendly traders. These were pirates. They came at us quickly, their ship fast and relentless. There were dozens of them, shouting and waving their weapons in the air. Our crew scrambled to prepare for the attack, but we were no match for the pirates. The battle was brief but violent. I remember the chaos, the screams, the sound of cannons firing, the clashing of swords. Men were falling left and right. It felt like the world was falling apart around me. I tried to fight back, but the pirates overpowered us. They captured most of the crew, including me. I remember being thrown to the ground and bound with rope. The last thing I saw before being dragged away was Captain Roberts, standing tall and defiant, refusing to give up without a fight. But in the end, it didn't matter. We were prisoners, taken by force, and our fates were now in the hands of the pirates. The pirates didn't kill us. Instead, they took us aboard their ship and set course for their hideout, a remote island known only to them. It was a desolate place, far from any major port or trade route. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. The pirates had made this place their home, and we were now part of their world, a world ruled by cruelty and fear. I quickly learned that life as a prisoner was harsh. We were treated like animals, forced to work without rest. Each day was a battle against exhaustion, hunger, and hopelessness. We did all the work the pirates didn't want to do, cleaning their ship, repairing their weapons, carrying their heavy loads. There was no kindness, no compassion. The pirates were ruthless and treated us with contempt. They took everything from us, our freedom, our dignity, our hope. As the days dragged on, I began to lose track of time. I no longer knew how long we had been there, weeks, maybe months. Every day felt the same, filled with work and suffering. I was exhausted, my body aching from the labor. But it was not just the physical toll that was breaking me. It was the feeling of being trapped, of knowing that I was powerless to change my fate. My dreams of travel, of building a future, felt like a distant memory. I had been brought so low that I could no longer see any way out. One afternoon, while I was working in the pirates' quarters, I saw her for the first time. She was a young woman, probably no older than I was, with dark hair and a quiet, sad expression on her face. She moved slowly, cleaning the floor with a rag, her eyes cast down, avoiding contact with anyone. I could tell right away that she, too, was a slave like me. Her name, I would later learn, was Amina. She didn't speak much, and I didn't have the courage to speak to her at first. But there was something about her, something in the way she carried herself, the way her eyes looked at the world, as if she had seen more suffering than any one person should ever have to endure. She was broken, just like the rest of us, but there was a quiet strength in her that I couldn't ignore. Over time, we began to speak in small, stolen moments. I would see her while we were both working, and sometimes we would exchange glances, brief but meaningful. We couldn't speak openly, not with the pirates watching, but we didn't need words. There was a connection between us, something unspoken, something deep and powerful. I learned that Amina had been captured by the pirates when she was just a girl. Her family had been killed, and she had been taken from her village to work for the pirates. She had no hope of escaping. Her life was one of constant labor and fear. But in her eyes, I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't seen in so long: hope. As the days passed, my feelings for Amina grew stronger. She became my anchor in that sea of despair. In the midst of all the pain and suffering, she was a reminder that there was still something beautiful in the world, something worth fighting for. I wanted to protect her, to keep her safe from the pirates, but I felt just as helpless as she did. We talked whenever we could, in whispered conversations late at night when the pirates were drunk or asleep. Our talks were simple, filled with the small details of our lives, the things that gave us comfort in a world that had become a nightmare. I learned that she had dreams once, too. Before the pirates came, she had hoped to become a teacher, to help children learn. She wanted to make a difference in the world. But those dreams had been stolen from her, just as mine had been stolen. We shared our stories, our hopes, and our fears. And in those moments, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't help it. I was falling in love with her. It was a love that grew slowly, over the course of many silent, stolen moments. It was a love born from shared pain, from mutual understanding. But it was also a love that could never be realized. We were both slaves, trapped in a world that saw us as nothing more than tools to be used. But still, I couldn't help the way I felt. Every time she looked at me, my heart would race. Every time our hands brushed by accident, I felt a spark of something I couldn't ignore. But there was no future for us, no happy ending. We were both bound by the same chains, prisoners in a world that had forgotten us. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Life on the pirate island became a never-ending cycle of work and despair. But through it all, Amina and I clung to each other. She was my only source of comfort, my only reason to keep going. And I, for her, was the same. We didn't know if we would ever escape, but we held on to each other, finding strength in the simple act of being together. But even as our feelings grew stronger, I knew that nothing would change unless we found a way to escape. We were both slaves in a pirate's world, and there was little hope of ever finding freedom. Still, in the quiet moments when the world seemed far away, I dared to dream. Maybe, just maybe, there would be a way out for us both. Maybe, one day, we could escape this place and build a life for ourselves, free from the chains that bound us. But for now, all we had were each other, and the faint hope that someday, somehow, we might find a way to be free. Life on the pirate island had become a strange sort of routine. Despite the grueling labor and constant fear, there was a certain rhythm to the days: work, silence, the occasional quiet moment with Amina. Yet, beneath that rhythm was a burning desire to escape, to flee from the hell we had been trapped in, and for the first time, I began to see a way out. I had always believed that I would find a way to return to the life I once dreamed of, but as time wore on, I realized that the only way to truly escape was to take matters into my own hands. The pirates had grown complacent in their island fortress, and I knew this was my chance. I had seen enough of their habits, their weaknesses, and the layout of the island. I could do this. I had to do this. The first sign that an escape was possible came one evening as the pirates gathered around their campfire, celebrating a successful raid on a neighboring village. I had been working late in the pirates' storage area, sorting through the crates of supplies, when I overheard one of them, Jarek, a brutal man with a scarred face, mention something that caught my attention. "We'll be staying here for at least another week," Jarek said, his voice rough and grating. "The next raid isn't scheduled for a while." I immediately froze. A week. That was all the time I had. A week before the pirates would leave again and the island would be quiet. That was the moment when everything clicked. If I could make my move before they left, I would have a better chance of getting away without being noticed. I had no time to waste. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. The thought of staying another day on that island, of being trapped in that nightmare for even one more moment, was unbearable. I knew that the only way to escape was by sea. The island was surrounded by dangerous waters, but the pirates had kept a small, unused boat hidden near the beach for their occasional trips to nearby islands. It wasn't much, but it was enough. If I could get to that boat, I could row myself to freedom. That night, under the cover of darkness, I made my way down to the beach. The pirates were drunk and distracted by their celebrations, so I was able to move undetected. The boat was small and worn, but it would do. I quickly got to work, preparing the boat for the journey ahead. I gathered what little supplies I could find: dried fish, a few crates of water, and a handful of weapons that I could use for protection if needed. I knew the waters beyond the island were treacherous, filled with dangerous currents and sea creatures. But I also knew that if I stayed, I would die a slave. My only chance was to take the risk, to put everything I had into this escape. I worked quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. The boat was barely seaworthy, but it was all I had. As I secured the last of the provisions and checked the weapons, a heavy weight settled in my stomach. I had everything ready. I was as prepared as I could be. But there was one thing I still had to do, the hardest thing of all. I had thought about it for days, about what I would do when the moment came. I had dreamed of taking Amina with me, of escaping together, of building a new life far away from the pirates' reach. But deep down, I knew it wasn't possible. The pirates watched us closely, and if they saw that Amina was missing, they would search the island. I had no doubt they would find her, and they would punish her severely for helping me escape. I couldn't let that happen to her. She deserved more than to be caught up in the chaos of my escape. And so, I made the painful decision to leave her behind. I couldn't drag her into the danger I was about to face. She was safer on the island, even if that was a terrible thought. If I ever escaped, I would come back for her. But for now, she had to stay. I couldn't tell her directly. I couldn't risk alerting the pirates or even the other slaves. But I had to say goodbye, in my own way. As I passed by the quarters where she worked, I saw her through the cracked door, sitting alone in the dim light. She was cleaning the floor, her head bent low, lost in her own thoughts. She didn't see me at first, and for a brief moment, I considered walking away, never looking back. But I couldn't. I couldn't leave without one last glance, one final moment of connection. I stepped inside quietly, careful not to make a sound. Amina looked up and our eyes met. There was no need for words. She knew. She could see the determination in my face, the sadness, the resolve. I walked toward her, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I had to say without speaking. I placed a hand gently on her arm, a silent promise that I would return. I couldn't stay, but I didn't want her to think I was abandoning her. The look she gave me, sad but understanding, broke my heart in a way that words never could. With a final lingering glance, I turned away and left. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I knew I wouldn't be able to leave. With my boat ready and the supplies secured, I made my way to the shore, heart racing. The boat bobbed gently in the water, waiting for me to climb aboard. I took one last look at the pirate camp, at the firelight flickering in the distance, and then I pushed the boat into the sea. The moon hung high above, casting an eerie glow on the waters. I rowed steadily, each stroke bringing me farther from the island, from the life I had known for so long. I could still hear the distant sounds of the pirates' laughter, their shouts echoing across the water. But I couldn't afford to look back. I had to keep moving forward. The current was strong, and the waves crashed against the side of the boat. But I didn't stop. I rowed with all the strength I had left, pulling myself away from the nightmare and toward the unknown. I had no idea where I was going or what lay ahead. All I knew was that I had to keep going. The island grew smaller and smaller behind me until it was just a speck in the distance. And as I sailed away, I couldn't help but think of Amina. I wondered if she was safe, if she was watching the same stars that I was. I hoped that someday I could return for her. But for now, I was alone. The night stretched on, and I rode into the darkness, carrying with me the hope of a new life and the weight of a painful goodbye. The days that followed my silent departure from the pirates' camp were filled with dread and anticipation. I knew that my time was limited. With each passing hour, the pirates would discover that I was gone. The island was not large, and they knew every corner of it. But I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't look back. The hardest part of my escape came just as I thought I was safe. I had managed to row for what felt like hours, the island now a faint outline in the distance, swallowed by the horizon. But just as the dark waters began to swallow the last traces of the island, I heard something that made my heart stop. The unmistakable sound of a boat being launched from the shore. I had no time to lose. The pirates were after me. They had discovered my disappearance and were coming to find me. The boat I had taken, though small, was no match for the pirates' larger vessels. I needed to think fast. It was then that I saw him, a young boy, no older than 12 or 13, with wide, frightened eyes, tied up, and placed under the watch of a pirate guard on the beach. I recognized him immediately. He was a slave, one of the younger boys who had been captured during a raid a few weeks prior. I had seen him working alongside the adults, his eyes constantly downcast as if trying to disappear into the ground. I didn't know his name, but I knew he didn't deserve the life that had been forced upon him. The guard who watched him was an older man, one who had always been more focused on keeping the younger slaves in line than actually paying attention to his surroundings. It was this inattentiveness that I had counted on. I had observed him for days now, waiting for the right moment. I slowly approached the guard from the shadows, staying low to the ground, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. The boy was sitting on the rocks, barely looking up. The guard was sitting nearby, smoking a crude pipe, lost in his own thoughts. It was then that I saw my chance. I grabbed a heavy rock from the shore and hurled it into the distance, hoping the sound would draw the guard's attention. Sure enough, the guard rose to his feet, grumbling, and went to investigate the noise. The boy, startled by the movement, glanced up. Without a moment's hesitation, I rushed forward, cutting the rope that bound his hands with a sharp knife I had found in the boat. The boy looked up at me in disbelief, as if unsure whether this was real or just another cruel twist of fate. But I didn't have time to explain. I whispered urgently, "We need to go." "Now!" His eyes widened, but he nodded quickly. Together, we ran toward the boat, the guard still out of sight. I pushed the boat into the water, helping the boy climb aboard first. I followed behind, and with a few strokes, we were off. As I rowed with all the strength I could muster, the boy sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the water ahead, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. The further we sailed, the more the shore seemed to disappear behind us. The island, once a looming presence in my mind, was now just a speck in the distance. The boy, still silent and tense, kept his eyes trained on the horizon, as though the endless expanse of water might somehow reveal a new world. But the sea was not kind. The waves were unpredictable, and the wind, which had been at our backs at first, began to die down. The boat, though sturdy enough, was small and vulnerable to the powerful forces of nature. We had no compass, no map, nothing but the stars and the winds to guide us. It didn't take long before I realized we were adrift. The boy, who had said little since we set out, looked at me with wide eyes, the fear evident in his face. "Will we find land?" he asked softly. I didn't know how to answer him. I had hoped we would, hoped that we would sail far enough to reach another shore, another place where we could find safety. But now, as the hours stretched into days, it became clear that the sea had no intention of making things easy for us. We drifted further and further from the island, but no land appeared on the horizon. Each morning, I scanned the vast, empty sea for any sign of land, and each evening, I lowered my eyes in defeat. The water was our only companion, endless and unforgiving. We rationed our food and water, but it didn't take long before our supplies began to dwindle. Each sip of water became more precious, each scrap of food a reminder of how fragile our survival was. I had no answers to give the boy. All I could do was keep rowing, hoping for a miracle. The boy's fear began to grow. He asked more questions, his voice trembling with each one. How much longer? What if we never find land? Are we going to die out here? I didn't know what to say. His fear was contagious, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. But I couldn't afford to show weakness. I couldn't let him see how scared I was. If I gave in to the fear, he would too. And so I rowed on, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion, praying for something, anything that would show us we weren't lost forever. Then, just as I was beginning to lose hope, I saw it. A faint outline on the horizon, so small that at first I thought it was just a trick of the light. But as we sailed closer, it became clearer. Land. It was small, just a thin strip of shore barely visible above the waterline. But it was land. We had found it. I steered the boat toward the shore, my heart pounding with a mix of exhaustion and relief. The boy beside me was staring at the land with wide eyes, his expression one of disbelief. For a moment, we just looked at the shore in silence. It was barren, a wild, untamed place that seemed untouched by human hands. But it was land, and for that, I was grateful. We managed to beach the boat on the rocky shore, and I let out a sigh of relief as I secured it to a nearby boulder. The boy jumped out first, running toward the edge of the shore where the water lapped at his feet. I followed him slowly, my legs aching from the long hours of rowing. The beach was quiet, the only sound the gentle crash of waves against the rocks. We needed water, food, and rest. But first, I had to make sure the island wasn't dangerous. I began to search for any sign of life, any animals, any plants that might be useful. As I moved through the sparse vegetation, I found nothing edible. It seemed this island was as barren as it appeared, but at least we had water. The boy and I dug into the sand, finding a small spring that bubbled up from beneath the earth. We drank deeply, the cool water filling us with a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in days. We had made it. But I knew our troubles were far from over. The island was uncharted, and we had no idea what lay ahead. But for now, we were alive, and we had made it through the storm. I turned to the boy, my heart heavy with the knowledge that this was only the beginning of our journey. He smiled at me, tired, but hopeful. We had made it this far, and that was enough. The island, though a refuge from the pirate ship, was far from a safe haven. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the unfamiliar land, I realized the true challenge of survival was just beginning. The land may have offered shelter, but it had its own dangers, wild, untamed, and full of mysteries that would test every ounce of our resolve. That first night on the island was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels thick, like the air itself is holding its breath. The boy, exhausted from the long journey and the shock of everything that had happened, lay on the ground beside the boat, his eyes closed in a fitful sleep. But I couldn't sleep. Not yet. My instincts told me to stay alert, to listen to the land. As I sat by the boat, staring into the darkening horizon, the quiet was shattered by a strange noise. It wasn't the usual rustle of wind through the trees or the gentle lapping of waves. No, this was different. This was something primal, something that echoed in the very marrow of my bones. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was distant at first, but then it grew louder, closer. The growl was followed by another, and then a whole chorus of them, different, jagged sounds, each one sending a chill down my spine. Something was out there, and it wasn't alone. I moved slowly, making my way towards the boy, careful not to wake him too soon. The sound was unmistakable now, a group of predators, no doubt. I had seen enough of the world to recognize the danger in that sound. But what could it be? I had heard tales of wild dogs, wolves, and even cougars, but the scale of the growls made me wonder. The question burned in my mind. What kind of animals roamed this strange island? The boy stirred in his sleep, murmuring faintly. I knelt beside him, trying to shake off the mounting fear that was creeping up on me. I needed to think clearly. The sounds grew louder, more terrifying. Then, it happened. Through the trees, I saw movement. A shadow, large and powerful, emerging from the underbrush. It was quick, yet deliberate, stalking with a grace that sent a shiver down my spine, and then, through the haze of moonlight, I saw it. A lion, its golden mane gleaming in the dim light, its eyes glowing with hunger and curiosity. A lion, on this small, isolated island. My mind raced, my body frozen in fear. The boy, oblivious to the danger, continued to sleep soundly. But I knew I couldn't wait. If the lion saw us, we would be its next meal. I had no weapons, nothing but my wits and the primal fear that surged through me. I reached for a sharp rock lying near the boat, gripping it tightly in my hand. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched the lion approach, its massive paws barely making a sound as it padded closer. It stopped about 20 feet away, its golden eyes fixed on us. It wasn't moving any closer, but it was waiting, watching. I had heard that lions, especially solitary ones, could be unpredictable. Some were curious, others were territorial, but none of that mattered now. We were intruders, and it saw us as a potential threat, or perhaps worse, as an easy meal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I knew what I had to do. I stood up slowly, not wanting to startle the lion, but knowing I couldn't let it get any closer. I raised the rock above my head, prepared to throw it if necessary. The lion's gaze never wavered, its muscles tensing as it prepared to pounce. I felt my heart beat faster. This was it. I had no choice. With a surge of adrenaline, I shouted, hoping that the loud, sudden noise would startle the lion and make it think twice. "Get back!" The lion hesitated, its eyes flicking from me to the boy. It took a step back, then another and another. It growled softly, its teeth bared in warning, but for some reason, it didn't attack. I kept my stance, watching the creature with every ounce of attention, prepared for any move it might make. And then, as if it had made up its mind, the lion turned and slinked back into the shadows, disappearing into the night. The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate, but my heart was still pounding in my chest. The boy stirred again, his eyes fluttering open. He looked around, confused. What happened? I didn't answer immediately. I simply let out a long, shaky breath. "We're safe, for now," I said, my voice hoarse. "But we need to be careful. This island isn't as safe as it seems." The boy nodded, his face pale with the remnants of sleep, but also a new understanding in his eyes. We weren't just stranded on an island. We were surviving in a place that would challenge everything we knew. The encounter with the lion had shaken me, but it had also reminded me of the importance of staying vigilant. The island was full of dangers, seen and unseen, and if we were going to survive, we needed to find food, water, and shelter. We spent the next day scouring the island for resources. The sun was high and the heat was oppressive, but we had no choice. We had to keep moving. Our first task was finding water. Without it, we wouldn't last more than a few days. I led the boy to the spring we had found the day before, but it wasn't enough. We needed more, something that would last us longer. We began to search the island, hoping to find another water source. Hours passed, the landscape stretching out endlessly before us. The trees, sparse and gnarled, offered little shade, and the ground was dry and cracked. I began to worry we might not find anything, but then, just as hope began to slip away, I saw something in the distance. I motioned for the boy to follow me, and we made our way toward the water. When we reached it, I knelt beside the stream and drank deeply, feeling the cool water fill my throat. The boy did the same, his eyes wide with relief. We had found water, but we still needed food. It took several more hours of searching, but eventually we found something. A cluster of fruit-bearing trees, their branches heavy with small, round fruits. They were unfamiliar to me, but hunger urged me to try them. The boy, desperate for anything to eat, grabbed one and took a bite. At first, he looked uncertain, but then he smiled. "It's sweet," he said, his voice full of wonder. I tasted one myself, and sure enough, the fruit was sweet, juicy, and satisfying. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us going. We gathered as much as we could, stashing some in the boat for later. But even with food and water, I knew our survival on this island was far from guaranteed. The dangers of this land were ever present, lurking just beyond the trees or under the surface of the calm waters. And still, we couldn't afford to stop. Every day was a struggle to stay alive, to stay one step ahead of the island's challenges. But as we sat by the stream that night, eating the sweet fruits and drinking our fill of water, I couldn't help but feel a small spark of hope. We had survived the lion, we had found food and water, and tomorrow we would face whatever new challenge came our way.